They walk past you at a pace so steady it feels mechanical. Hooves on tarmac, chest out, eyes forward. And if you are standing on the mall on any given morning, watching the household cavalry make their way from Hyde Park Barracks toward Horse Guards Parade, you might notice something if you are paying the right kind of attention. Some of the horses are gray, some are black, not mixed together randomly, not assigned by availability, not chosen because one color happened to be in the stable that morning. Gray horses on one side, black horses on the other, consistent, deliberate, centuries deep. Most people do not notice, and the ones who do notice almost never ask why. They assume it is decoration, a visual choice made by someone with an eye for contrast and pageantry. They take their photograph, they move on, and they never find out that what they just walked past was a living, breathing archive of British military identity going back over 400 years. This is the story of why that color matters, why it has always mattered, and why two of the most elite cavalry regiments in the world will tell you quietly, without drama, in the way that people tell you things they have never had to explain before, that the color of the horse is not a detail. It is everything. Start with what you see when you see nothing yet. You are new to London. You have done the Tower, you have done the Eye, you have done the changing of the guard at Buckingham Palace, and someone, a friend, a guidebook, a well-meaning hotel concierge, has told you to go and watch the household cavalry mounted regiment ride out in the morning. So you go. And what you see is this: riders in gleaming breastplates, helmets with white or red plumes depending on the day and the regiment, boots polished to a mirror, swords at the hip, and the horses enormous, steady, moving with a precision that does not look trained so much as inherited, as if the horses themselves have always known how to do this. You watch, you take your photo. You think beautiful, you think very British. You think, if you are being honest, I wonder how they keep those boots so clean. What you do not think, because nobody tells you, because it is not on any sign, because it is one of those things that London simply knows about itself and assumes everyone else does too, is that you are looking at a color code, a regimental signature, a distinction so fundamental to the identity of these two cavalry units that it predates the uniform, predates the current palace, predates the very concept of a standing British army as we understand it today. The gray horses belong to the Life Guards. The black horses belong to the Blues and Royals. And that, in the simplest possible terms, is where this story begins. The Life Guards are the senior regiment of the household cavalry. Senior in the way that the eldest child of a very old family is senior, not louder, not more powerful necessarily, but first. They trace their origin to 1659, to the men who rode with King Charles II during his exile in the Netherlands, and returned with him to England at the restoration of the monarchy in 1660. They were the king's personal mounted escort. They rode gray horses then. They ride gray horses now. The Blues and Royals are the result of a 1969 amalgamation of two older regiments, the Royal Horse Guards, known historically as the Blues because of their distinctive blue uniform, and the Royal Dragoons. The Royal Horse Guards had been riding black horses since the 17th century. When the amalgamation happened and the Blues and Royals were formed, the black horse tradition came with them intact, non-negotiable, the one thing in the merger that was never put up for discussion. So when you see both regiments together at a state occasion, at trooping the color at the daily ride out, you are seeing the visual shorthand of 4 centuries of separate identity expressed through color. No nameplate required. No announcement necessary. Gray means Life Guards. Black means Blues and Royals. Every officer knows it. Every soldier knows it. Every horse, in its own way, has been selected to fit it. What matters here, and this is the part that surprises people every single time, is that this is not a preference. It is not a guideline. It is a regimental requirement so embedded in the identity of these units that it shapes everything from horse procurement to stable management to the very way a new recruit learns to see the animals in their care. The color is not what the horse looks like. The color is what the regiment is. Now, where do these horses actually come from? Because this is where most people's assumptions fall apart completely. The image that lives in the public imagination is something like this. A perfect black horse, perhaps Irish, perhaps bred specifically for ceremony, handed to a household cavalry stable hand and immediately ready for the maul. Calm, trained, gleaming, essentially decorative. The reality is considerably more complicated and considerably more interesting. The household cavalry sources its horses primarily from Ireland, specifically from the Irish Sport Horse Studbook, which produces the kind of animal that has the size, the bone density, the temperament, and the movement quality required for mounted ceremonial duties in one of the most chaotic sensory environments on the planet, London, central London. With buses and tourists and protest marches and cameras and motorcycles and children and pigeons, and the particular ambient roar of a capital city that never fully stops making noise. A horse that is going to stand on the mall for hours at a stretch, or ride through crowds at Horse Guards parade during a state visit, needs to be a specific kind of animal. Not just big, not just beautiful, not just the right color. It needs to have a nervous system that processes threat differently from most horses, more slowly, more deliberately, with what trainers sometimes describe as a long fuse. A horse that startles easily is not just inconvenient in this environment, it is dangerous. So the selection process begins with temperament long before it arrives at color. Horses are evaluated at the mounted regiment's base at Hyde Park Barracks in Knightsbridge. They are assessed for how they respond to sudden noise, to crowds, to unfamiliar objects, to the particular pressure of urban environments. Many horses that arrive as strong candidates wash out at this stage, not because they are bad horses, because they are normal horses. And normal horses are not built for what the household cavalry needs. Then, only after temperament is confirmed, color becomes the determining factor for which regiment the horse will join. A gray horse of the right size and disposition goes to the Life Guards. A black horse of equivalent quality goes to the Blues and Royals. A horse that arrives at the barracks bay and is, say, chestnut or roan, or any color that falls outside the regimental palette does not stay. It is rehomed, perfectly respectably, to other equestrian purposes. It is not a failure. It is simply not what the regiment requires. This sounds on the surface like an absurd level of specificity, and perhaps it is. But consider what you are building when you build a mounted ceremonial regiment on this model. You are not building a show. You are building a visual institution. Every element of what the public sees when the household cavalry rides out, every uniform detail, every piece of tack, every inch of polished leather and metal, is a statement of continuity. The gray horse is not there because gray is pretty. It is there because gray has always been there, because gray is the Life Guards, because when you see gray horses on the mall, you are seeing the direct visual descendant of the horses that rode beside Charles II in 1660. The color is the institution's handshake with its own history. And institutions that take their history seriously do not compromise on the handshake. Here is something most people do not know, and something that changes the way you look at these horses the moment you learn it. Gray horses and black horses on a battlefield were not equivalent. They were not interchangeable. They were chosen by senior officers and regimental commanders for specific tactical and psychological reasons that had nothing to do with aesthetics and everything to do with visibility, recognition, and the particular mechanics of warfare before radios existed. In the era of horse cavalry, and we are talking here about a period spanning roughly 3 centuries, from the English Civil War through to the late 19th century, the battlefield was a problem of communication and recognition at a scale that is almost impossible to imagine from a modern standpoint. Tens of thousands of men and animals in motion, in dust and smoke, in terrain that obscured line of sight, in situations where the difference between a friendly unit and an enemy unit could mean the difference between reinforcement and catastrophe. And in the middle of all of this, A commander needed to be seen. A regiment needed to be identified. Color was one of the primary tools for doing this. Gray horses, which reflect light differently from dark horses, were visible at greater distances in certain battlefield conditions. They stood out against earth and tree line in a way that made a gray horse unit easier to identify from elevation, from a distance, from the fog of engagement. This is not a minor thing. This is command and control expressed through animal color. Senior officers, colonels, generals, the men whose visibility was essential for morale and coordination, frequently rode gray horses specifically because they needed to be seen and identified by their own troops under conditions that made every other visual signal unreliable. The Duke of Wellington rode a gray horse. His horse Copenhagen was actually chestnut, a fact that occasionally confuses this particular bit of history, but the principle holds across dozens of other commanders and campaigns. The gray horse was a signal, a beacon, a way of saying, the command is here, the regiment is here, this is us. Black horses served a different but equally purposeful function. In units that rode at night, that conducted raids or flanking maneuvers in low light conditions, darker horses provided a degree of natural concealment that gray horses simply could not offer. The Blues, riding black horses, had a unit identity built partly on the tactical utility of that darkness. Their horses were not decorative. They were, in the language of military practicality, appropriate to purpose. What this means, and this is the reframe that the story has been building toward, is that the color tradition you see on the mall today is not a decorative relic of a more ceremonial age. It is the ceremonial preservation of something that was once entirely functional. Every gray horse in the lifeguard's column is carrying, without knowing it, the logic of battlefield command visibility. Every black horse in the Blues and Royals is carrying the logic of tactical concealment and regimental darkness. The ceremony is the memory, the color is the history, and the history is not decoration. It never was. There is a moment in the training of a household cavalry horse that the regiment's riding staff describe in various ways but always with the same underlying meaning. It is the moment when the horse stops reacting and starts accepting. Not tolerating, not enduring, accepting. The moment when the crowds and the noise and the pressure of the urban environment stop being threats the horse is managing and become simply the conditions of its life. This moment does not arrive quickly. The training pipeline for a household cavalry horse runs to approximately 18 months from the point of arrival at Hyde Park Barracks to the point of operational readiness, meaning readiness to ride in public duties, on the mall, at state occasions. 18 months of incremental exposure, of patient systematic desensitization, of building the specific kind of trust between horse and rider that functions not as affection but as language. A shared vocabulary of pressure and release, of leg and rein, of the particular signals that mean slow down, hold here, do not react, I have this. The riding staff, the soldiers of the household cavalry who work with these horses daily, will tell you that no two horses go through this process identically. Some horses take to urban environments with what trainers describe as natural curiosity. They look at the buses. They watch the tourists. They process the motorcycles as information rather than threat with relatively little intervention required. These horses are, in stable slang, naturals. They make everyone's life easier. Other horses take longer. They have triggers that require patient, repeated, deliberate work to reduce. A particular sound, a particular kind of crowd movement. The sudden deployment of a tourist selfie stick at close range. This, apparently, has been a growing challenge in recent years. These horses are not worse horses. They are horses whose nervous systems require more investment. The regiment makes that investment because the alternative, a horse that is not fully prepared for public duty, is not an option. But here is what makes the household cavalry's relationship with its horses distinct from almost any other equestrian institution in the world. These horses are not interchangeable units in a fleet. They are individuals with documented personalities, with known preferences and known sensitivities, with names that are used daily and that the public often comes to know. And the regiment does not work around those personalities. It works with them. A horse that is brilliant in the school but becomes tense at the sound of a particular kind of brass instrument gets that information noted, gets managed accordingly at state occasions where bands are present, gets a rider who knows this about them and compensates quietly without drama. A horse that is unusually calm in crowd situations gets assigned to positions in the column where crowd pressure is highest. A horse that forms an unusually strong bond with a particular rider gets considered for paired duties where possible, not because the regiment is sentimental, but because a horse and rider who trust each other at a deep level perform better. The unit benefits from the relationship. This is not widely understood about the household cavalry. The image is of perfect, interchangeable ceremonial machinery. The reality is of a working institution that has learned, over centuries, that the machinery works better when you treat the horses like the individuals they are. The names matter. This is a thing that people discover usually by accident, reading a small notice board outside Hyde Park Barracks, or stumbling across a news article, or simply asking one of the soldiers a question they were not expecting to be asked. And once they discover it, they tend to find it unexpectedly affecting. The horses of the household cavalry have names, not numbers, not designations, names. And these names have their own tradition, their own internal logic, their own quiet poetry. Lifeguards' horses, the gray ones, tend to be given names beginning with specific letters in a rotation system that allows the regiment to track age and intake year at a glance. Blues and Royals' horses, the black ones, have a separate naming tradition. When you know both systems, you can tell not just which regiment a horse belongs to, but approximately how long it has been in service, simply from what it is called. Some of these horses become publicly known, specifically named horses that appear at major state occasions, that feature in photographs taken by the thousands on the mall, that develop, through sheer repetition of public appearance, a kind of recognizable identity. The public notices them. The public becomes attached to them. And when something happens to a well-known household cavalry horse, retirement, illness, death, it is reported in newspapers, discussed on social media, mourned with a genuineness that surprises people who thought they were just watching a ceremony. This is not sentimentality without foundation. These horses do something real. They carry something real. They stand in the rain at state funerals and they hold their position in crowds of hundreds of thousands and they perform, day after day, year after year, a function that is partly symbolic and partly deeply practical. When a head of state visits London, the household cavalry's mounted escort is not decorative. It is a working security element operating in coordination with the Metropolitan Police and the wider protection detail. The horses are trained to maintain formation under pressure, to respond to rider signals in chaotic environments, to hold their ground when the environment is telling them to run. They do this reliably because they have been trained to do it and because they have been treated throughout their service life as partners rather than equipment. Retirement is where the story arrives at its quietest and in some ways its most revealing chapter. Because the way any institution treats the individuals who have served it tells you more about that institution than any amount of ceremony or pageantry. Household cavalry horses are typically retired between the ages of 18 and 20, though some serve beyond this if health and soundness allow. The decision is made by the regiment's veterinary staff in consultation with the riding staff who know each horse personally. It is not a bureaucratic process. It is a judgment made by people who have worked with the animal for years and who can see, in the quality of its movement, in its response to work, in the small daily signals that long familiarity makes legible, that the time has come. Retired horses do not go to auction. This is a policy, not an accident. The regiment works with a network of approved homes private owners, equestrian charities, former service personnel, who have been assessed for their ability to provide appropriate care for a horse of this specific background. A household cavalry horse coming out of service is not a typical retired horse. It has spent its working life in a highly structured, highly managed environment. It has been handled daily by trained soldiers. It knows certain routines very well and may need time and patience to adapt to a quieter life. The homes that receive these horses understand this. They are not taking on a project. They are taking on a responsibility, and they do so knowingly. The regiment maintains contact with retired horses, welfare checks, follow-up visits, an ongoing relationship that does not end at the stable gate. This is not unique to the household cavalry. Many working horse institutions have similar practices, but it is worth naming specifically because it contradicts the assumption that ceremony-based institutions view their animals as props. They do not, or at least the good ones do not, and the household cavalry, by most measures, is a good one. There is something in this, in the retirement policy, in the naming tradition, in the personality-aware training approach, that points toward the larger meaning of the whole story. These horses are not incidental to what the household cavalry is. They are not the vehicle for the ceremony. They are part of the institution itself. The gray horse on the mall is not carrying a lifeguard soldier. The gray horse on the mall is the lifeguards, in the same way that the black horse is the blues and royals, in the same way that the color has always been the regiment's first and most permanent statement of identity. You do not swap the color any more than you would swap the flag. You do not choose gray or black on a given morning based on which horses are available. The color is the commitment. The color is the history. The color, held steady across 4 centuries of war and peace and political upheaval, and the slow transformation of cavalry from military arm to living ceremonial institution, is the thing that has not changed because it is the thing that cannot change without the regiment ceasing, in some essential way, to be itself. So here is what you now know that you did not know when you started reading. You know that the gray horses on the mall are lifeguards' horses, and that they have been gray since 1660, and that the gray is not a preference but a regimental identity so old it predates almost every other institution you can name in British public life. You know that the black horses are blues and royals' horses, carrying a color tradition that began with the Royal Horse Guards and survived a regimental merger intact, because some things are simply not negotiable. You know that these horses are sourced from Ireland, selected for temperament before color, trained for 18 months before they are considered ready for the mall, and known throughout their service lives by names that follow a tradition the regiment uses to track its own history in real time. You know that the gray horse was once a battlefield signal, a commander's beacon, a way of saying, in the chaos and smoke of an engagement, here is the command, here is the regiment, this is us. You know that the black horse carried a different utility, darkness as concealment, night as advantage, and that this utility became tradition, and the tradition became identity, and the identity is still walking past you on 4 legs every morning at a pace so steady it feels mechanical. You know that behind the perfect stillness of a household cavalry horse at the gate of Horse Guards parade, there is 18 months of patient, systematic work. There is a rider who knows this specific animal's specific sensitivities. There is a regimental culture that treats the personality of the horse as operationally relevant information rather than inconvenience. There is a vet and a stable staff and a welfare network and a retirement policy that says, clearly and without ambiguity, that the obligation to these animals does not end when the service does. And you know now that what looked like decoration was never decoration. What looked like ceremony was always, underneath it, something that had once been entirely functional, a survival logic, a command logic, a battlefield logic that calcified over centuries into tradition precisely because it worked. The things that survive that long in institutions like this one do not survive by accident. They survive because they carry meaning that the institution cannot afford to lose, even when the original context that generated the meaning has been gone for over 100 years. But here is the question worth sitting with. Not the historical question, not the military question, the human one. Do you think most people who walk past the household cavalry on the mall understand any of this? Do you think the tourist with the camera, the commuter with the coffee, the child being lifted up for a better view, do you think they know that the color of the horse is a 400-year-old regimental signature? Do you think they know about the battlefield visibility logic, about the 18-month training pipeline, about the retirement network, about the horse names, and what the naming tradition encodes? Most of them do not, and this is not a criticism. It is simply the nature of living history that operates in plain sight. The household cavalry does not announce itself with explanatory text panels. It does not stop on the mall to explain the color system to curious onlookers. It rides. It holds its formation. It does its duty. And it trusts in the particular quiet confidence of an institution that has been doing this for 4 centuries, that the thing it is doing is worth doing whether or not anyone watching fully understands what they are seeing. There is something genuinely admirable about that, about the commitment to the thing itself rather than to the perception of the thing. The lifeguards are not gray because it photographs well. They are gray because they have always been gray, because the gray is the regiment, and the regiment does not perform its history for the benefit of observers. It simply is its history daily, reliably, in weather that is frequently terrible and crowds that are frequently chaotic, and a city that has been changing around it continuously since 1660. That is not decoration. That is something considerably rarer. That is an institution that has held its form across 4 centuries of change and still knows exactly what it is when it rides out in the morning. Gray on the left, black on the right, hooves on tarmac, chest out, eyes forward. So next time you find yourself on the mall, next time you see them coming, that steady sound, that particular pace, the morning light catching the breastplates and the helmets and the horses moving together with a precision that looks inherited rather than trained. Look at the colors, and now you will know what you are looking at. The gray ones are the life guards. They have been riding beside the monarch since Charles II came home. They have been gray every single day since. The black ones are the blues and royals. Their color carried them through battle and merger and 2 world wars and the slow transformation of cavalry into ceremony. And the color is still black, still deliberate, still the first thing the regiment says about itself to anyone paying attention. Both of them have been doing this longer than almost any institution you can name. Both of them will be doing it tomorrow. Both of them know exactly who they are. Do you think that kind of continuity is something that can be manufactured? Do you think an institution builds that kind of identity through ceremony alone, through pageantry alone, through the decision to make things look a particular way? Or do you think it builds it through 400 years of knowing, quietly, precisely, without needing to explain itself, that the color of the horse is not a detail? It never was. Tell us in the comments what surprised you most about the household cavalry's horse traditions. Have you ever watched the daily ride out and noticed the color difference? Or did you walk past without realizing what you were seeing? And if you have a favorite named household cavalry horse, there are a few that have become genuinely well known over the years. We would love to hear about it below. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. The ones that look like ceremony on the outside. The ones that turn out to be history all the way down.